All right. All right. Our meeting is now live this evening. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. So we are here tonight for the public input session for the ACBG grants. And a lot of words there to say. So again, this is our time for everybody in the house to really talk about the grant, what our expectations are, anything that we'd like to see, questions we might have, any ideas that we have, any changes, any strong dislikes, we can also talk about those. But that is why we were here tonight. So probably the best way to open up this meeting and get us kicked off is really to allow American Structure Point, who is kind of the driving force behind this project, or at least the force that got us to this point, right? American Structure Point is here tonight, and I think it would be good at this point, this is probably our third meeting, to really talk about the overview of the project, and I've provided them with some input along the way. Michael is very, very well versed in that, so I want to allow them the opportunity to really go through this project and share some things with us. From that, I would like to maybe not as much turn it into a question and answer session directly based off of what they do, but from that start our public input session so that we each have enough time to share. And I apologize, let me back up just a second there. From the American Structure Point, I would like to go into the OHC. We also have the OHC here with us tonight as well. So I would like to give them the opportunity to kind of highlight their project, talk about their part in this grant. And then from that, we will go directly into public input. Everybody will have their time to share their ideas, ask their questions, as well as council. So that's really the agenda for tonight. Okay. All right. So we typically try to allow 90 minutes for these meetings. Doesn't mean it has to be exactly 90 minutes, but I'm just wanting to throw that out there. If we happen to go long, that's okay too as well. But I do want to start us off with American Structure Point. So gentlemen, I have your presentation right here.
All right.
Maybe.
Or
File not found. What did I do wrong? One second.
that's probably
There it is. Hold on, let me see.
all right. Well, thank you, Mayor. And while you're looking at that, hopefully we have on the screen that looks like it's working. Hello again, Village Council, members of the public. We were here, I want to say like 3 weeks ago, and I see some new familiar faces or new faces in the room tonight. So I won't do as big of an overview as I did last time of the whole history of the project, but I will provide the essentials of where we're at and where we need to know. So really high level, Appalachia Community Grant was a $450 million discretionary grant put out by the state of Ohio 2 years ago, towards the end of 2022. And as part of ACGP, the state wanted to allow time for communities to think through project ideas about what would be competitive for the criteria of that grant. And the purpose of that grant was to do transformative projects that along the lines of either infrastructure, healthcare, or workforce development. Those were their three criteria. And ideally have some combination of 2 or 3 of those inside the project proposal. To assist communities with that task of coming up with eligible project ideas that would be transformative and that would represent multiple millions of dollars of investment per community, the state hired 20 planning, architecture, engineering firms like mine to go into communities throughout the 32 Appalachian counties of Ohio and help communities plan projects. So we were one of the firms selected and hired by the state of Ohio to perform that work. And we were partnered with the village of Georgetown, as well as several other communities throughout the region to plan these project ideas. So my team and I first started working with the village on this project in March of 2023 with the former council, the former village administrator, and there's obviously some overlap between these bodies, to develop ideas for what Georgetown's projects could be. And very early on, we latched onto the idea that the square of Georgetown, the courthouse square, is a central focal point of the community. It is a place that residents use on a daily, weekly basis for all manner of activity, whether that's social, economic, whatever the case may be. And there's also numerous festivals, including Kegs for a Cause coming up in a couple weeks, that are held on the village square. It really is a focal point of public life. And to that end, the conversation quickly became, all right, how could we use this grant opportunity to enhance the public square? It's already pretty great now. What could we do to make it a place that's more attractive for residents to spend time in, for visitors to come see, and most importantly of all, for local business owners and even some out-of-town ones to make investments in the square, to bring commerce back, to bring back some new restaurants, to bring in some retail? What would create a built environment? What could we do to the public assets that would entice investment in the square by the local community? So that was really the initial driving force behind the ideas. Fortunately for Georgetown and for the rest of the region, based upon what the state chose to fund, this turned out to be right in line with what the state wanted to fund. I'll skip to the very end of the story to say that the state got about $2.2 billion worth of applications from communities throughout the 32 counties, and they had to choose about $420 million worth of projects to fund. Out of that $420 million, it's safe to say that somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the money went to projects just like Georgetown's, to downtown revitalization projects that would enhance the urban core of all the cities and villages. Most county seats out of the 32 counties got funded for similar projects. This turned out to be the kind of thing that the state wanted to fund in a general sense. Now, in a sense very specific to Georgetown, it also became clear once we got into the project that Georgetown has a very, very unique story to tell. Not just for the county, not just for the region, not just for the state, but really for the entire country. It is the boyhood home of a U.S. president. And there's only been 44 men that have been president. So that's a really big deal. And as we got further along with the grant, and as we began to understand the nuances of what the state was looking for thematically and what the other communities were doing, and I'm skipping over a lot of the story I told at the previous meeting. If you have questions about that, happy to answer later. But we then started to talk to Ohio History Connection about their properties in Georgetown and about OHC's longstanding desire to enhance those properties. And OHC will speak in a minute about what their vision for those properties are. But suffice it to say that OHC has always, for decades, put a high priority and premium on the grant sites. They are special assets for the state of Ohio. And it's always generally been the case that those sites, while they've always been very, very important, have usually just fallen short of the state's criteria for funding through the traditional means that OHC seeks funding. So this particular program, this particular grant, Appalachia Community Grant, was a very attractive source for Ohio History Connection to make longstanding, decades-planned repairs to their buildings. So it became a very logical partnership between the village, OHC, and us as the engineering firm that was spearheading this whole thing and planning it out to make sure we could get the grant, for OHC's properties to be included in the overall vision for this project. Because at the end of the day, what would drive, especially out-of-town residents, to visit Georgetown? It's important to say that people already come to Georgetown in the status quo to come see U.S. Grant. There are plenty of out-of-town history buffs from multiple states that come here to tour the boyhood home and the schoolhouse site. Ohio History Connection keeps ample statistics on this. But there's also school groups that come, and these sites are used. Thousands of people visit the village of Georgetown already to come to these sites. By enhancing the sites and their capability, most critically, to handle larger groups, which OHC will speak to, and also enhancing the square at the same time, the idea could be that, hey, maybe somebody's not just going to come in for a day trip or a morning trip. They might actually want to stay here and spend some money here and experience all that Georgetown and Brown County has to offer. And that really is the vision, because if we can beautify the public assets of the square to catalyze private investment in businesses, to complement the existing visitors that already come to Georgetown for the grant sites, and then hopefully to enhance those visitors, the ones that have already come here before, come back again, see what's new, learn about grant in a whole new way. That's where the magic really happens. residents. And so we presented that vision to the state of Ohio through this grant application through 3 distinct component projects. The streetscape project, the repairs that Ohio History Connection will make to their facilities, and then a visitor center concept where we would look to place a visitor center that the village would own inside the village to serve as a conduit between the square and the grant sites. We presented that vision to the state, and they funded it. They made a full award for what was asked for Georgetown's projects. And that's a big victory, because in a world where there were $2.2 billion worth of applications for projects and Georgetown got just under $9 million for it, is a really big deal. So we are now at the point where we're about 6 to 7 weeks since that announcement was made, because it was all announced on May 1st. The applications went in December, so there was quite a bit of lag time. Our firm, my firm, has been working on this project, these concepts, this entire time. We've done a lot of preliminary work. We've done surveys, we've developed the concept packets that are in front of you. Now that this project is funded and now that it's real, we are in the process of finalizing our concept for what this streetscape needs to be. So the public meetings that the village is having, that I know a lot of you have attended, has been really geared to get your feedback for what you are thinking about for what needs to be on the square. And everything in the diagrams, they're very conceptual in nature. All of the details can and absolutely will, depending on feedback, be changed. If there are particular colors of brick, if there are particular signage or lighting that looks a little bit off, that doesn't reflect the historic character, all of that is on the table for discussion, debate, as we finalize the concept. Nothing here was ever meant to be set in stone. It was meant to provide a visual image in high definition rendering to get the state to see the vision for what we were trying to accomplish. And now that we have secured the funds, it is time to finalize the concept. And in the course of our work over the past few weeks, we have made a number of decisions that will make the image that you see not quite what's going to be built already, just based off of what we've learned about other entities' plans, including the commissioners, and also based off some engineering data that we've been able to gather. So what we are really here for tonight is to hear feedback from the village, council, the general public. This is not the last time we will be here. We will have a strong presence at the Kegs for a Cause Festival in a couple of weeks. We will also be launching robust online surveys so that everyone in the village and the county has a chance to see these concepts, understand what we're doing, and weigh in on the particulars of the plan. The only deadline that is facing us, and this goes for both the village with American Structure Point, the Streetscape Project, as well as OHC, is all of the money has to be spent by October 31st, 2026. So all of this stuff has to be, concepts got to be finalized, designs got to be done, construction has to occur, all within about 2 years, and where are we at? We're about to be in July, or we're in July, so 2 years and 3 or 4 months. So this is going to move quickly. And that's why we are here, want to get feedback, and the process, we're pretty satisfied where it's at, but we are on top of this. It's the highest priority project of our firm, this suite of projects, and Georgetown's among them, of course. And we are dedicated to delivering exactly what this community wants, all the way down to the details and the particulars. So all ears. Just so everybody knows, got a couple of members of my team who were here last time listening in. I hope they can hear me. I put them on silent on my phone, so if they're talking, we can't hear them. But I am unmuted, so they can also hear if there's some specific feedback. So that is the general overview of what this project is. There's a lot of details I skipped over. Obviously, we have not been hearing the particulars of what's been discussed in previous public meetings, but the council's been taking good notes and has been relaying to us. But that's the general overview. Probably best to turn it over to you for the presentation part and then figure out the discussion afterward.
Yeah. And what I would like to do is definitely, I want everybody's voice to be heard. They're going to be here for the whole evening. So as we go through each individual's input, then that is our time to ask questions of Michael and his team or the OHC or just in general. So that's kind of the layout for tonight. Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Jen Altman, I know you're here from the OHC, as well as Doug McDonald has been here each week. I will allow you guys to address the crowd too as well. There is we do live stream, so if you can at least stay in the vicinity of a microphone, that would probably be helpful. And that one just tap. Yeah, it's on. You're good. Yeah, you're good.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us here. And I want to thank Michael and American Structure Point and Doug for being our local representative. Really appreciate the work that everybody's put on this together. So I would also be remiss if I didn't thank our U.S. Grant Homestead Association, our site managing partners. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and taking such good care of the site every day. So I am here just to express how excited we are about this and how important the grant sites are to us and this project here in Georgetown. I think Michael expressed my feelings really accurately that the grant sites are gems to all of us. They're historic gems. And what often happens with our funding is we get state capital funding, and that funding, well, there's never enough to go around. I think we all probably know that. But also, we're really restricted to using it at the sites themselves. So this project is a really unique opportunity to interconnect different pieces with the village and the sites and really do something that can't be done using other funding sources. So it has sort of put us all in this crucible of having just 2+ years to get this together, but to really work together on a vision. And so the reason that the grant sites, I mean, obviously Grant, an incredibly important president, but also beyond that, Grant's importance just in the Civil War and saving the Union. And I think one of the things that we really want to stress through our interpretation about Grant that we'll have the opportunity to do, and I'll talk about the visitor center in a minute, what that will allow us to do that we can't do now, is that Ulysses S. Grant was a product of living in this part of Ohio. And there was a really unique movement, that he grew out of, that his father was part of. So just historically, his sensibility that he took into the Civil War and that passion that really drove him for the cause is something that comes from this place. I think it's really important that visitors who come here know that, and that we really can tell. And I just want to thank them. They do such a great job of sharing that story, but we can share it more fully. So I think you all who are here are aware, there's the boyhood home and the schoolhouse, but also the tannery that we acquired several years ago has been sitting and waiting for work. And this will allow us to address some of that. We do have some capital dollars to put towards the tannery, but this will allow us to do other projects that those weren't going to fund. And so bringing that all together and making a cohesive story, that really is where the visitor center is going to shine. Because when you think about those spaces, so we have every day at our sites, when we bring visitors through, you think about the group size, right? Just actually, how do you move people through? And historic homes are some of the most challenging places for us because they were homes. They were not places that were designed to have 25 school children getting an orientation. So it's often very difficult. A lot of times the historic homes, we really can only do that when the weather is good because we have to orient kids in large groups outdoors. So the visitor center really gives us an opportunity to have groups come in, to have a place to orient, like a group of school children, to do that no matter the weather, to give them an overview of Grant and how what he did in his life is connected to this place, to Georgetown and to Southern Ohio, and to the really important social movements that were here. So really excited about the opportunity for the visitor center and working with the village on that. I know that it was conceived as, it's the village's building ultimately that we hopefully would have a lease on. We would work together on the design of that building so that it works for those purposes, that it's a place where you can tell the Grant story, but also that larger story, because again, he was a product of this place and this place carries that legacy into today. So that's the vision that I would love to work with you all on. I know we'll get really into the details on it. And then I just want to say that at the sites themselves, so at the boyhood home and at the schoolhouse and at the tannery, we will work very closely with the U.S. Grant Homestead Association on what specific projects. We always have a long list of projects for every one of our sites. And so how to prioritize those, which ones are the highest impact. We're going to have conversations with them because they are the ones who know every day what is most needed at the site. So really excited to get started on that work, and happy to answer any questions you have more specifically. Just really appreciate the collaboration, and we're really looking forward to that. And Georgetown is truly, it's a special place that was received for the community here. Thanks for your partnership. Yeah. Sure.
Will do, and I would say probably the two of you would be good to stay. And actually, I mean, Jen, you might want to just come up here. That way I can allow the public to have that mic.
Yeah.
And Michael, you're more than welcome to just have a seat. So that way everybody's attached to a microphone and we can hear at home. So we'll move into our roundtable portion of the meeting. Again, this is your time to ask questions, to share comments, commentary, whatever you would like to bring to the table for us. So I'm going to start actually right in the front of the room. Nancy, would you like to kick us off?
Not yet.
Okay. Jan, any comments? No?
No.
Okay. I'm going to start. Allison, any comments? All right. Susan?
Yeah.
Come on up.
Was I required? No.
And just as you guys come to the microphone, just please state your name for the people at home that are watching and also for the people in the audience.
Can I do it? Without falling down, yes. I will. Is this mic running?
Pull it just a tad closer and yep, there it goes. That's good.
Got it? Okay.
It's working.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that history is still happening in Georgetown and that we shouldn't shut our eyes to the present and to the future. So that's a statement that says, please don't change the lettering on the buildings so it's all from 1870. I think that that is a corny mistake that many towns make. However, I sat down at my computer and I typed out all my ideas, which were, there were 5 of them that were not so good and 2 of them that were really wonderful. And so I debated whether should I go through 5 and build you up until you get to the wonderful ones, or if I should just talk now about the wonderful. Then my computer said, printer does not work. So I had to sit down with a pen, very, very old-fashioned, and write some things that were still in my mind from my typing. I love Georgetown, and I hate Georgetown. I have this constant back and forth, and I have good reasons. The love part comes from the fact that it is a beautiful place. It has beautiful surroundings, and it has many, many beautiful people. And that is Georgetown for me. I'm going to give you the 2 whammo ideas first. Let me see, where am I? I see that you've already covered trees and landscaping. I think our main square has been something of a disaster with its pots and its bushes, and it just isn't exciting. I hope that you have some really exciting ideas. I bet you do. So forget that one. Restructuring the square, and I just want to bring something to your attention. I don't know how long ago it was, Kelly, that they dug the wires under the street. Was that like 10 years? 10 years. Okay. They ran out of money. It's a shame because they did Cherry Street, they did Main Street, they did Apple Street, and then Grant Street was left like an orphan with ugly telephone poles. They ran out of money. I don't know how that happened, but it did. I hope that you will respect the changes that were made at that time. The underground wires, I think, was in the hundreds, thousands of dollars.
I can do you one better there. A couple of years ago, my firm was contracted by the village on a totally separate project to this to do a full capital improvements plan for the village. They looked at their utilities and looked at their electric. That report is, I don't know, a couple thousand pages long. it's very extensive and documents the specific challenges and history that you were talking about. So we are very aware, the village and this engineering firm, about what the challenges are when it comes to underground utilities and underground electric in the village. And we have in previous times pursued grant funding through the traditional channels for utility infrastructure, seeking those repairs. And so this is a topic that is on our minds. And when you're speaking about this, we have factored these things in. So can we fix everything with this grant? No. But can we do some targeted investments in the square to address the specific electric and utility issues that you're mentioning? Yes. And that is part of our scope.
Thank you. I don't trust other people to have these ideas, so I'm glad you did have it. I might as well go through all 25. The sidewalks. Big brouhaha about the sidewalks. I live on North Main Street, and I see people in their wheelchairs riding down the street with their grandchildren hanging on the wheelchair. There are no ramps at corners. You already thought of that. Okay, I'll move on. There are 2,000 items in the American Disability, 1,000, I exaggerate, 1,000 items about ramps and corners. So I just gave up on that. Trees and landscaping, parking. This is one of my good ideas, and I bet you already thought about it. I did live in Florida for a while next to a little village called Mount Dora. It's like the key tourist place of Central Florida. And they built a multi-story parking garage at the edge of town, and they have used it. It has not gone to waste. They have literally hundreds of thousands of people coming there. When I lived there were 7 antique shops on Main Street. I mean, it is a real mecca for tourists. But if that is too iffy for Georgetown, I know that, they're talking about, well, you'd have to, you'd give something up and you'd have to walk a long way. And that's when I got one of my good ideas, and I hope you think it is a good idea as well. And that would be a minibus or a van or a streetcar type of thing, or horses in a carriage, some way to have public transportation in Georgetown. Perhaps limited to the summer because we do have snow issues here. But from the parking lots, there's the shopping center. I'm sure they'd be happy to have extra people in their shopping center. From Hanlon Park, where big parking could be created. From the fairgrounds, which actually doesn't belong to Georgetown. It is a county, a kind of a stuffy and stubborn county agency that runs that. We love our fairgrounds. We love our fairgrounds, and we love our fairs. What a perfect place to park people, and they can see the garages and the warehouses and all of the excitement that's in there. Go through the barns, look at the horses or something.
So if I may, just to piggyback on your points, part of our vision is to reconstruct the sidewalks and possibly figure out if we can do a shared use trail to connect the fairgrounds area, that entrance, exactly what you're talking about, to the square. Because to your point about sidewalks, not only are we looking at repairing all of the sidewalks inside the footprint of the square, we also want to extend that down State Street to get to the fairgrounds. Obviously, that has use for when the fair is happening and for kegs for the cause when there's square events on the festival space. But it also, to your point, would provide a logical place for folks to park if there was ever an overflow in the village itself. As for the parking garage, just to give you a little detail there, for this particular grant source, pretty much every community that we worked in asked about and thought about parking garages, because everything that you said is true. Parking facilities in communities where there's a lot going on downtown, you don't want to add to the street parking, you don't want to tear buildings down to put parking lots in, because if you punch a bunch of holes in historic buildings that were built in the 1900s, it just sort of looks like a mouth with teeth knocked out. It's not a good situation. So we unfortunately were precluded from applying for any kind of parking facility under this grant. What I would say is that in general, there are thresholds by which agencies state governments, federal governments will provide funding for parking structures if certain thresholds for the number of people parked, number of visitors are met. My hope would be that this project generates, in part helps to catalyze, I wouldn't say generates, catalyzes enough economic activity in downtown Georgetown over the next 2 to 5 years where there's such a huge parking problem that Georgetown would be eligible for some kind of funding source like that. So our goal is to get Georgetown to the point where there's a very clear and present need for a parking facility along the lines of what you described. The village isn't there yet, but our project can hopefully help catalyze that. Yes. And to the point about parking in general, our vision, of course, is to shrink the total amount of pavement on the square, as you can see from our renderings. Part of that's for 3 reasons. Number one, the streets don't align correctly. So like traffic, you kind of weave in and out. It's a little bit of a safety issue. So we want to make sure that the streets are aligned so the traffic moves straight and the crosswalks along those lines are fixed. Because you've got some very interesting crosswalks where the dimensions are not quite what they should be. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is maintaining all of that pavement is a lot of money. And so if we can take out 25% of the paved area for the village, that saves on the village's budget. It also creates green space that's much more conducive to community activities. Reason number three is to orient the parking so it's a little bit safer. On the square right now, you've got parallel on both sides. When things get really, really crowded, that can get a little bit funky with folks trying to move in and out at the same time. You get higher preponderance of fender benders, that kind of thing. So we have looked at ways to mark out parking spaces on the side streets that are going to basically put back all of the parking, and we hope to maybe add a couple more spaces, like total village-wide. Now, they might be a little bit further from the square, to your point about marking, but we want to clearly delineate what safe distances and safe parking means for the village-wide throughout the square area.
Good. Well, I didn't have to think of that one, did I?
I'm glad you
One
have.
thing about my thought. I'm a pedestrian, but not a very good one. I keep falling down all the time, and it takes 3 men to get me up. It's the most dangerous thing for older people. One crack on the head and I'm finished. Don't anybody get any ideas about that? Anyway, I see a vehicle of some kind going through the town, starting at the parking places and going through the town on a schedule, stopping at the attractions, the Grant House, the courthouse, all various places, some of the historic homes on North Main Street, of which there are many, and providing a schedule so that not only tourists, but also local residents like me, who do not walk well, can ride the bus. And then I started thinking about it, and I've seen other places that have a vehicle all decked out like an old trolley, probably with a bell ringing and things like that. And that would be an experience for a visitor. That's a good thing. So I leave that to you. I think you're better prepared to think about this than I am, but I have to have my say. Someplace I saw that they were hoping to find a place for children to play. And briefly, I would just like to say that Bicentennial Park, which is in front of the courthouse, is a very underused place. We have one crazy person who sits in the park and does all kinds of crazy things, does little dances and things like that. But ordinarily, there are no children playing there. However, there are no facilities for a kid to play in there. And I think some simple playground equipment, some swings, some slides, a merry-go-round, that could go right in that round structure in the park or next to the mural. It would be an ideal place. More tables, chairs for people to picnic. Maybe local businesses could offer a Bicentennial Park box lunch or something like that, so that there'd be another use for that area. It is very underused. Finally, Do you have a drum roll here or anything? This is for the visitor center. I know, Kelly, you remarked that we're thinking of a concert stage someplace. And a concert stage in front of the courthouse would be kind of like heresy. You know, it was not there in 1844 when the courthouse was built or when the courthouse burned down or at any time. And so we would not want to reproduce that. And then I got a great idea. And I hope that this isn't too shocking for you. We have concerts, we have events, we could have more concerts and more events. If the visitor center, which can be well set back from, you thought of this already, didn't you?
On.
I think we might be related. ESP. If you had a platform in the front of it, which could be used for like a patio for tables and chairs in the summer. But when we had a concert, it could be used easily by the musicians. There would be good electric service to them because it's always a crapshoot whether they're actually going to get connected. That was my idea. And you don't need to make this look like an old music hall or something like that, please. It could be just a nice modern place where you could wash your face and use the toilet. There's a wonderful new kind of toilet. I don't know if you're aware of this, the kind that is transparent. So you can see who's inside before you commit to going inside of it. And then when you get inside and lock the door, it becomes opaque. I think that would be an attraction in itself, providing somebody didn't go at it with a bat or something like that. You know, there's always the underside of things in this town. That's it. That's it. I'm sorry, I wasn't first with all this, but.
I think those are wonderful ideas. I think you're going to like what you see. The only thing I would add is, you know, when you kept looking at me as if you've already thought of it, it's actually really the council. So
Everybody in the council knows me, and they're probably going to, kick me out at some point today. But I wanted to talk with you because you have already created these ideas. So it's like a brotherhood or something, it's like, I'm glad to hear that they're in the works. And I think this is a wonderful thing that has happened to Georgetown. And I'm very happy that you all got to participate in this moment. I mean, I was on council years ago, and I don't remember that we ever did anything. It was like we'd go to the meeting twice a month. We got paid. That was a nice little compensation. But other than harassing Kelly, I never got to do very much of anything in that council. And this is real movement, and it's really exciting. And I may try to live to see it. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Susan. Very good comments.
By the way, if I ever get my computer fixed, I'll send you that thing, but I hate my computer.
Thank you.
Oops.
Mac.
hey now.
All right. Let's see. So while Susan's moving along, Mr. Horn, would you like to address the group tonight?
Okay.
Just make sure you come up to the mic and state your name.
Hello, my name's Michael Horn. Sure, I'm becoming increasingly familiar. I have a suggestion in that the project is so big that we probably need to break it into manageable chunks. So the visitor center could be kept separate from the street improvements. And I think that would start to make things easier to grab. The other thing is, it's probably time to talk about specific streets, specific properties, who's going to sacrifice space to an increased easement, what exactly is going to happen on the streetscaping, the square is, the center, but I'm thinking of it more like how big does the tic-tac-toe grid go out? Are we talking 1 block away for parking, 2 blocks away from parking? What opportunities are we missing? What things have we not considered that meet the goal of increasing increasing parking or influencing the project that we haven't yet considered? Like I was driving by 125 into town, and it's like, well, the shoulder there's wide enough to put in a couple parking spots. And so, that's fairly uncontroversial. Nobody's going to be mad for more parking on a shoulder that's not being used. When you talk about, oh, well, we need part of your yard, people are going to get mad. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, Stan, would you like to address? Okay. The Lodwicks, I know Sue, Ned.
So I'm Ned Lodwick. I am currently president of the U.S. Grant Homestead Association, historian of the Brown County Historical Society. So one thing I know everybody knows is I want to remind everybody that this whole project area is a national historic site. So things need to be done so that it stays that way. But I'm sure everybody knows that. I am going to do something I don't think I ever did in veterinary practice. I'm going to beat a dead horse. So since we have new people here that have not been here before, speaking as a citizen, parallel parking. We could take a 5-minute break and walk outside. When I drove by to go to the fairgrounds to look at the cabin that they're starting to work on now, there were 3 cars parked on each side of the street, a parking space and a half apart. And now those parks are filled with the spot missing. They could have another car or 2 because everybody pulls in and parks and don't know how to parallel park. So I will say, diagonal parking is easy for people, and wherever it can be used, I think it's a good idea. There has been comments that there's never any problem parking in Georgetown. I contend that's not right. Okay. There were still quite a few cars parked at the square when I drove in town tonight. I'm kind of like Susan. I don't like walking around a bunch. And so close is good for me. I know there's have to be give and take, so that's okay. As a comic relief, I had a client this week with 2 poodles named Kelly Hessler. And I made to mention to him, there has been some comments about possibly moving the statue. And he goes, oh, hell no. And so I already told him, no, I think that's off the table. Okay. So, just for a little comedy, Grain Association has not yet had a chance to have a meeting with OHC. And so we're going to hold all our comments about the homestead, the tannery, the sidewalk, the visitor center. We'll talk to OHC about that. But I just want to say that, I think parking that's all I hear. Every place I go, people say, you've been to those meetings. What are they going to do about parking? And I know in the drawings, most of it stays diagonal. But, and my last thing will be, there is a stage that was built by the Grant Homestead Association in the village of Georgetown, and it's being stored at the village garage, including a carpet on the top of it. It's temporary. We used it for music. We used it for General Grant talking, and it just fits right on the front steps and comes up to the sidewalk, and it's big enough for most of the bands we have. So that would require, a forklift and to put it in place. But I think they took it out in one piece. So that is available as a temporary thing. So yeah. Yeah. So it was heavy, built really well, heavy materials, and it's in storage and dry, and so that is something that could be temporarily done if needed. So I don't think I have anything else. Just glad to see everybody here tonight. So I think that's a good deal. Well, everybody but the commissioners. So, and they did know about the meeting because I've been dealing with them through the COVID grant. Okay, so they're tired of hearing from me asking questions about it, and I've been telling them, there's a meeting tonight. But I talked to Sarah about 5:30 tonight, and she says, "Oh, I forgot." So I think they'll be calling you. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ed. All right, gentlemen and ma'am, there in the corner, anything for the group? No? All right, thank you. All right, I will open it up to council at this point. I'm sorry. Oh, Nancy, coming up.
I was waiting for somebody to bring up park and it wouldn't be Ed and I disagree. There's a lot of people in town disagree with me, but I will tell you, I went through the square today about 2:00, and there were more cars there than there were last week. I came out of Tom Mays' office on Monday, and I was at about 1:15. I was the only car parked in front of Merchants Row. So I'm not saying sometimes there's not problems, but let's not get too willy-nilly about parking. As I said before, nobody is ever going to say, "What do you want to do?" "Oh, let's go to Georgetown. They have parking." It's not going to happen. Now, one other thing two things. Susan brought up years ago about making it one way around the square. And then just recently, I think it was Mike. Where'd Mike go? Mike, was that you that brought up about one way around the square on Facebook?
Yes, but it was talked about here, making roads one.
Yeah. I think because the big trucks, the parking, you could probably slant it more, but there's never 2 lanes going Grant, Apple, Cherry. And I think making that one way around there and leave Main Street going both directions would help a lot. And then if you're going to do slanted parking, which I personally prefer, I had to parallel park in my driver's test and wondered why in the world, living in Kettering, I had learned how to parallel park. And then I came to Georgetown and I found out who parallel parks. Not my favorite thing. So, I'm not anti the slanted, but I just think they've got to be angled more. And I think the traffic will flow better if it's one way. We could have a square around, because Mount Orb has their roundabout. We could have a square about. Anyway, the other thing, which has nothing to do with this, one reason I was on the square is I took Stella's talking about our parking problem to heart. Now, I know there are it's either 3 or 4 of the probation cars always there, and I know that it has been addressed in the past, and the judge will not even entertain moving those. But there are 2 areas, and it says police vehicles, but it's for the sheriffs when they bring the prisoners in. That's 2 spots. There's no reason those couldn't, in fact, they'd be closer to the door if they were moved to the other side of the walkway, that they could be moved to the other half. And if they didn't want to do that, if signs were put up that said, because it says no parking, police only. Well, they're not there all the time. And just say police parking, weekdays, 8 to 5. And then on the weekends when she's, that's at least 2 spots. So that's all.
Did I miss anyone in the audience or anybody have any additional comments in the audience? Susan?
I'll try to talk about that. When I was on council, if you may remember, we were asked to invent 5 things for Georgetown. So one of my inventions was to make Main Street one way north, to make Apple Street one way south. And I realize Apple Street isn't there, a real problem. It's built on the crest of a little hill, so big problems. But I would just advise our visitors, if you really want to see a parking problem in Georgetown, come to the fair. You will see everybody's kitchen furniture in their parking spaces in front of their house to keep the visitors out. You will see people renting out their front yard for parking. I mean, it is really a mess. So, we don't see it. We see spaces at 4 PM in front of the hardware store, and that's great. But when there's a real event here, there's a lot of distant parking. And at that point, that conveyance would be a great help. I'm sorry, that's all. I can't stop talking.
Thank you, Susan. All right, so let's start with our council and share comments, feedback, questions. Mike, I'll start with you on the end.
Okay, I got quite a few things. For one, we talked about the realignment of the streets, but when I look at this page 4, and you might flip to that, well, actually, you could even stay there for a moment if you wanted, but page 4. No,
That's
it's the
7, 8.
overview. Yes, okay. Now, we say we're going to realign the streets and make them to where they come straight through. But I see a little bit of movement there, but they're not still aligned perfectly. There's still a bump out on every area, whether it's over by my building by the park or whether it's over on the other side by the coffee loft. And I hate this, I'm going to take Ned's line earlier. I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm up there every single day on this square. I own a restaurant on the square. I own another building where the Republican headquarters sits currently. I live above that building. There is never enough parking other than certain times of the day. This is a fact. When we have court, we have jurors that take all of our parking spots. And that's a big concern on those days for lunch. So if you come by at 2:45, yes, lunch rush is over. We're not going to worry about parking at 2:45. We're going to worry about it from 10:30 to 2 roughly. And that is when court is in session. That's when we have people coming and going from the court. I don't think that the coffee loft either, the owners of that would like the ideal of the parking being turned either, because again, we're going to lose a lot of parking. And what Ned said is a fact. You have problems with people pulling, I'm guilty of it, not parking in the parking spot on a parallel park where I need to. So that's a huge concern, a huge concern. I don't see the benefit of it. We're going to make the sidewalks larger around the courthouse. There's just, I don't see the point in this. Even during big events, we always shut down the streets anyway. So it's not like we need all this sidewalk space for the average day of Georgetown life. And even Ms. Montgomery spoke to this earlier, and I've heard about it in previous council meetings about my dually sticking out in the parking on right in front of where I live. And again, that sidewalk is probably 8 foot deep. I don't know why we cannot remove some of that sidewalk or look into doing that, shorten the width of the sidewalk up, pull the cars into where they're not stuck out in the road, and we would gain more parking. We're looking, from what I'm seeing here, we're looking at adding on all the way around the courthouse, and then we're moving cars out into the road more, and we're shrinking that. And it was mentioned earlier that we're shrinking the road's footprint and making the sidewalks bigger, and that'll save us on costs for the roads, but we're going to have to pay costs for the sidewalks the same. The cost is still the same to replace sidewalks as it is roads. I mean, I've done driveways. Now, they're not the whole square, but they are yards of concrete, and they are, say 25 by 100. I don't see where we're going to save by shrinking we're going to save money for the village by shrinking the footprint of the driving area. I don't, again, as a business owner, I don't agree with that. And I own 2 properties up there. Maybe that don't matter, but I feel like that should matter.
As far as your question about the alignment of the streets and parking is, there's all sides of it shared tonight, right? So you've shared your opinion, Nancy shared hers, Ned's shared his. I think that's the point of American Structure Point, is really to hear what you guys are concerned about and for them to take that to the table and come back with some ideas, additional ideas. As far as the alignment of the street, one of the things you mentioned, the coffee loft and, having their parking there. One of the things that I know the coffee loft will be happy about is they have a dip in front of their business that collects water when it rains. When we speak to the alignment of the street and some changes there, those are some of the things that are going to be changed, where it's all going to be at surface level. It's not going to have dips when you come out of the Grant Avenue light by the hardware store and come across like you're going to the coffee loft. There's a major dip in the road there. All of that's going to be resurfaced so that it's at the level that it should be. And it provides a more walkable path. So keep that in mind.
And that's wonderful, that right there. But I don't know why we would widen the sidewalks around the courthouse to make it less parking. Just like I don't know why we would come to the thought of trying to make this project cut back sidewalks so in the future we could possibly build a parking garage. I have quite a few older customers that, I live with them having to walk those distances.
A couple quick points of clarification. Number one, that image up there is not completely reflective of the alignment when we draw it out in CAD. So that's a visual that's rendered. It doesn't show the precise alignment of where those curbs will actually be. We have drawings in our programs, CAD, some other stuff. I'm not an engineer, so I can speak to that show that alignment being precise. So don't get thrown off by the image. It is a precise alignment, just on that point.
And I understand that.
Yeah. The second point I'd say about parking, and you raise legitimate concerns, and this is stuff that we have heard here, and we have heard in all the other communities that we're working in, because parking is a hot button issue. No community wants to take away parking. We get it. There's a balance and a trade-off. What I would just say is general is there are a lot of issues that you're raising, which are legitimate issues, and that we've heard in the crowd here tonight as well, can be addressed with strategies like increasing the number of handicap parking spaces in front of buildings where seniors need to access, including the businesses. So handicap spaces along the square, there's a few of them, but there could be more, and they could also be more clearly marked. That is a way to get at some of these concerns. The other pieces when it comes to sidewalk cost, road costs, those are good details to bring up. The idea, I guess I would say is, your points about parking, moving the sidewalks, trying to get spaces in there, it sort of gets at what you want to build. And so there is an avenue where we could absolutely build additional parallel parking spaces and not shrink the sidewalks. If that's the will of council, we will do it. This is the village's project, it's your project. There are trade-offs that come with that though, because we've all been to malls and Black Friday they're filled, and then every other time of the week you got a gigantic parking lot. And there's not a lot of character to it or a lot there. I'm not saying that downtown's a parking lot, because it's not. The square mile is not anything close to that. But by moving it more in the needle of walkable, prettier, space with interesting visual elements, green spaces, replacing those, the current greenery there now with actual trees. It creates a more visually interesting spot. So it's just all about the trade-offs.
Well, and then like a lot of these houses or a lot of these buildings on the back row, there are a lot of apartments there. And there's people that, some of them's 2-3 bedroom apartments. So you've got tenants that got 2-3 cars. And that's an issue. And anyways, I'll get off that. There was a couple other things I wanted to hit, and I hope that you seriously look at that.
Yeah.
Because parking is an issue. I live it every single day. I own a business on that square for 16 years, and it is truly a problem during lunch periods and lunch times. And
to go into just a little quick kind of in the weeds thing, but a detail that's worth thinking about as you think through this issue. In a lot of cases, especially in communities with squares like Georgetown and business communities like Georgetown, and I actually grew up in the county seat of Geauga County. Chardon, Ohio is just over 5,000 people. It's a little bigger than Georgetown, but not much. And, if you go to the average resident in Chardon, they would say they've got a parking issue, but they would also concede that in a lot of cases, during daytime hours when folks want to park, you got employees of businesses that are parking right in front. To your point about residences, that's a good problem to have. If you've got a bunch of loft apartments and residents are parking their cars right in front of their homes, nobody can blame them. But from a public policy standpoint, maybe there's an alternate permanent space for somebody to have that they know is dedicated, that's theirs, that's marked on a side street to support developers who want to build loft housing and people who want to live in them on the square, which then frees up a space on the first floor for the retail establishment that is there. So the point in bringing that up is to say that we are actively considering how to create an environment where parking is made whole, where it addresses the needs of the community as they are. Seniors and the ability to physically walk is something we are actively thinking about, and in the final concept is addressed. We want to look at adding handicap spaces. And there is some other creative things that, as this project moves along the village, we could engage with those tenants that live in the downtown lots. I'd love to know precisely how many there are. Like how many folks are currently living in downtown apartments? How many of those buildings are potentially to be converted over the next 3 to 5 years? Like that kind of in the weeds detail will help us more precisely calibrate the recommendation to design our concept so that there's enough parking to suit today, a little bit more to suit the growth that we're coming. But as I said earlier, our goal is to create a much larger parking problem. Our goal is to make it the case so that there's so much activity in downtown Georgetown that it allows the next level of development to occur, which would include making it enticing for a private developer to want to partner with the village on a parking structure.
I have a lot of people in a month come up to me and tell me that they couldn't come to the restaurant because of parking. I think that we lose business because of it too. Again, moving forward from that, at this point, I'd like to also mention the stone boulders. Is that going to be redone, that wall, am I to understand, or are we going to use the original wall around that courthouse? Because I think a lot of people would be very upset if we tore that wall out to build a boulder wall around the courthouse.
So as I
think that would be, obviously, that's the commissioner's call. And I want to ask who wants to tell Judge Weiler.
About the parking too, right? I mean, I don't think he'll be happy about the
No, he
parking
won't be
either.
happy with it. It was built, I assume, it was built during the Depression by the youth corps of the WPA, teaching them how to lay stone walls. So it, in and itself, is a historic structure.
As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the renderings were intended to give the state of Ohio, the funding source, a vision for what we would do. We have talked about with the village not doing the sidewalk, anything remotely close to what's in that image because of the commissioners and what they've done in the recent past, turning the brick into concrete, those kind of things. The stone wall, we don't need to touch it. Like, there's nothing there, especially on that side of the street, that's set into stone. No pun intended. So, things can be moved around and decided. It's not like there's been a final decision made on any of that stuff.
Well, and again, I don't mean to sound difficult, but, this is the third meeting we've had, or fourth meeting? Okay, third meeting, and I know it's been a quick meeting, and I know that you guys, I'm not trying to push this on you guys, but it's gonna sound like it.
You're doing fine.
I just feel like, why are we, I get why we're having the meeting, but to a degree I don't, because here we're discussing things that we want to see changed. This was mentioned at the very first meeting that we had you guys at. I'm still seeing basically everything the same. I know you can't do all of this. I know this is a lot, okay? So I get why it ain't done yet, but at the same time, I don't feel like we've gone anywhere in 3 weeks other than repeated what was said.
Because that was the expectation, Mike. That was the expectation that was set. These meetings are simply set so that we can share our input, capture the input from the audience, and take that back to American Structure Point. We cannot expect them week after week to come back to a meeting for the first 3 weeks and change the document based on what was said in the meeting.
I didn't ask them to,
We,
just to be clear.
just because somebody does make a comment or a recommendation of what they would like to see doesn't 100% necessarily mean that that's what the village is going to decide to do. We are the village. We are listening to what everyone wants along with sharing our ideas. And the end game is that American Structure Point is going to take this information and they're going to work with us, work with Travis mainly, to come back and provide multiple examples of we can do this, more realistic ideas. So I think we need to be very open-minded to these meetings and not so harsh on American Structure Point.
Well, I'm not trying to be. It's just a hard question to ask, and a lot of people don't want to ask that. But again, I'm a business owner on the square, and they speak to the ideal that people will invest because the crowding of everything going on. But I tell you, I own a building over there I want to continue to invest in, but I don't want to invest in it if I got 2 parking spots in front of it.
So your point about parking has been captured.
Right.
Then your point about the drawings has also been captured because that wasn't the intended goal of these meetings from the start. The intended goal was to get public here, to listen to their input, capture their ideas, share ideas, educate everyone at the same time, and then take that information back and come back with the best examples that they can come back. We're still going to make changes thereafter, even when they come back to the table. There's more to decide. But this is the only way that we can truly, along with the surveys, this is the only way that we can truly capture the comments and the feedback to make sure that, we're trying to be as inclusive as possible with the ultimate design. Good.
And to add to that point, just for everybody's aware, this process would not be going this quickly if we did not have the October 2026 spending deadline. That hangs over all this, and that hangs over OHC as well. So when you, as the Grant Society, you work with OHC to figure out the boyhood home concepts, please keep that in mind because it is a sprint. We're trying to do multiple things at the same time. And just as a little window into that, we are going to start engineering like as soon as we're under contract, which will be in hopefully 2 weeks, because that's a whole other longer story. We won't have probably a final decided concept that everyone on council blesses. I would guess probably not until September at the very earliest, which is totally fine. So we're trying to figure out how to basically start engineering on a concept that isn't finished. And that's a balancing act. And we're going to do it. It's all going to be good, but it shows the nature of what we're in. And that kind of is what it is, but it's also incredibly exciting to your point about wanting to live to see it because it's going to happen. Like none of this stuff's going to get delayed, like it has to happen.
Well, Mr. Horn mentioned earlier about I was listening to what you were saying there, and I got off track.
Working on extra space on 125.
Oh, okay, no, procedure, schedule. My concern also, one other concern that I have is how they're going to go about taking all of this and removing it and how they're going to go about doing it. Like, are we going to be able to, are they going to go in and tear everything up? I would assume they wouldn't. I would like to think not, but I would hope that they would do that in like complete side of the courthouse complete, side of the courthouse complete. The only reason why I say this is because 14 years ago, well, maybe probably not 12 years ago, they redid that sidewalk on that side. And we lost an incredible amount of business. Now, if they wanted to tear that out and shut it down for a month, that's one thing. We can go and close the doors on the restaurant and just live with that. But how many, I mean, I own my buildings, but some of these businesses on Commercial Road, I'm sure they do have a payment on them. And that hurts business a lot. I mean, like the new hardware owner, for example. I don't know how he is financially. It ain't none of my business, but I am concerned how that's going to affect people like himself that are new on ownership of business. They've got a note, they've got to pay, they've got employees that could potentially. Again, I'm sorry to bring all these things up.
it's a valid
difficult
point.
questions, but they've got to be answered
Yeah.
because I almost lost my business because of that.
No, it's a valid point, and you're speaking the truth. And the bottom line is, something like you just described, do a street, do a street, do a street, do a street. That is what we would attempt to ask the contractor to do. Like maintenance of traffic, maintenance of the ability of downtown to still function during construction. Also, there's so many nitty gritties when it comes down into this, and that's what the design phase is for. As we get into, I would say probably the end of this year, early next year, as we're starting to finish design, there'll be a chance to really detail out what the construction phases are intended to be. And that's a huge integral part of this whole thing. It's not our intention to say, hey, Square business owners, tough luck, let's shut down for 3 months.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that.
But that's been done before, that's why.
So there's every intention, and it will happen to avoid that. So, that all can be worked out through the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I apologize.
No,
I sound harsh. I want to know, I know that these parking
Yeah.
spots do matter because of the business that I have.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think when we come back with the final concept or the decision slides that the mayor mentioned, one of the things we're going to ask of you guys, the village, as I mentioned earlier, trade-offs, is to sort of consider those trade-offs. It's like, all right, well, this concept might have the same number of spaces, but it's going to have trade-offs if we remove like 5 of them. And if we remove the 5, you get this. That's the kind of decision tree type of stuff that we're going to set up. But accompanying that could also be certain policy reforms the village could take for how it regulates its spaces. Handicapped, you mentioned the courthouse and the 10 to 5, some dialogue with the commissioners and the judges about their parking, even though it's all village parking for what theirs looks like around the square. Like all that would be part of that phase where we can really dig into those details of, all right, what spaces need to be for who, how do we regulate that? Do we think about something like parking meters, like all those kind of things on the table at that time?
And let's be honest, even as a council, we may not all agree on the final design. We might have to, have trade-offs between some of us too, as well as we make that final decision. But this is all part of a bigger plan. And I think no matter how it turns out, it's going to be such a better district for this community, and the walkability, such as Susan talked about, the walkability of the streets and around the square is going to be very nice. And the ability for the historical sites to kind of be mixed in there and be part of the overarching project, I think is going to be a huge benefit for this community. So, all right. Mike, are you sure?
Yeah, thank you guys. Sorry again about, it matters. It matters.
All right. We're moving right along then. Councilmember Barnhart.
Okay, so just what I was thinking, I don't know if this is possible, but see on page 3, all of these are diamond shapes.
Yep.
If that was moved to, the corner, then they would all be diamonds and it would be cohesive. So just an option. I'm not an engineer or anything.
So basically, we have it shown on this rendering as squares, to line it all up
Yeah.
as squares. You're thinking that a diamond pattern could be interesting.
So that could give character. If it was a cute little, something in the middle. And then that would also hopefully keep, more parking spaces. Just putting that out there. I'm not an engineer or anything.
Along those lines, how would you feel about diamonds in the middle? Like sometimes you see communities where they have a
Yeah.
diamond crosswalk, in addition to the square, so that they would go across the intersection.
Yeah. So
That's an
just
idea.
something cute, possibly, if it worked into, the streetscape stuff. Also, for my personal priority would be sidewalks as far out as we can go in every direction that the grant allows, because we do have the people in the wheelchairs. We do have every single team from the school runs down Main Street, and whenever I would walk down Main Street with a stroller, then you hope your baby doesn't fall out. So that would be a big priority. I know, we have limited funding and whatever. But then also if we're keeping all the diamond shapes, that may give more, money for other things. Okay. And then just something to keep in mind. I hate whenever people plant a giant, elm tree, something huge right under a wire line, and it's dude, in 10 years that's going to be such an eyesore. So I'm sure that you have thought about this, but I really hope that you have trees and landscaping that is size appropriate, and not giant forest trees in front of that mural, or where it's just going to cause more problems, and the roots are going to get under the sidewalks and all of that stuff, which I'm sure you have in mind, but I just want to put it out there.
To that point, I think we talked about this last time, getting feedback from the village, the council, and the public, or if you guys have a tree commission, about the specific types of trees, to that point, that you would like to see, is feedback we'd be happy to get. I mean, if there's specific types, specific dimensions, specific sizes, all of that can be absolutely changed out to whatever is needed. And to your point about utilities, yes, we do not want to plant trees underneath existing overhead utility lines.
Yeah, I really hate that. Yeah. Okay, that's all for me.
Yeah, the only thing I have, I know this is in the beginning stages, but I personally feel like the only way to compromise having planters and trees and new sidewalks would be the making it around the courthouse one way. Right now, a typical lane's 10 feet for traffic. Okay, so if you have one coming each way, it's 20 feet. And then if you have parallel on one side or angled on the other, you're still looking at another roughly 18 feet. And we're just out of that space up there. It would take a lot of planning, I think, to make it work out. But if you still lined the sidewalks up and you put new sidewalks in, and then you did some really cool stuff with some greenery and still changed the whole look of it, one thing to consider may be literally a one way all the way around with angled parking on both sides of the street. That would give you the most parking. That would tie into if you had a restaurant like Mike's that has to have semis pull in the front real quick. I think that would be the only way, in my opinion, to incorporate the most in a smaller area. So that's all I have. Is I know that's still something we're all talking about, but just looking at all the different designs, I think you'd still have nice big sidewalks, a lot of nice planters, and it would still change the look of it tremendously and still be pretty functional. But that's all I got.
I'll just share a couple of thoughts before I move on, specific to what I'm looking for or would like to see in this project as more areas for people to sit, enjoy. I think we've heard that a couple of times. One of the things I like if you go downtown Cincinnati, they have areas that, families can sit in. They have nice little swings. I'm not saying that we should have all of that, but I think that's important as we continue to build this up, is to make it a place where people want to come, sit, enjoy, have a lunch. We have restaurants. Somebody mentioned box lunches, could be something on a restaurant menu. So I think as we go through this scope, if we keep some of those things in mind, that would be very nice to see. Sorry, Ned, I'm still stuck on somehow there's got to be this concert space that is just built in. It doesn't have to be.
I'm at every concert, so
It doesn't have to be ugly. I don't know. Don't know if it can happen, but it's a wish list item for me. And then one of the things I think Ned would like this, we have a very nice mural that is, it's basically across from the courthouse, and it's to go. Where's the mural? What street is that? The mural, is that Cherry? I still haven't learned my streets, and I've lived here my entire life. There's a very nice mural there, and something I definitely would like to see is that through this transition, as we're looking at sidewalks and these bump outs and or whatever it turns out to be, right? There's got to be a way to make sure that as we cut that corner in front of the mural, that we somehow make that where it's really not a space to be parked upon, right? So there's a way to bump a nice sidewalk or something around there. Again, I don't build things for a living, but there's a way to make that happen. And I think that's an easy fix and it would fix a lot of grumbling, so that we can always make sure that when people do come to town, take a photo in front of that mural. So just things that I would like to have thought about as we move forward. So, all right, Councilmember Garbett.
I have a couple of things. One, we can't be short-sighted in how we're planning. I'm thinking about what American Structure Point is doing. We have to try to make Georgetown a destination instead of, hey, I can find a good parking spot in front of the place I want to go there and then leave, right? Because if we do that, then what we're doing is we're not feeding into the entire economy of Georgetown, the entire community feel. And if we get kind of caught up in thinking like that, I think we're gonna short ourselves, and we're not going to build the community that we want it to be. We go to Maysville all the time, and Maysville has one-way streets. They have parallel parking, but they also have designated parking areas where you go 7 shops. We want them to stop into Cherry Street. We want them to stop into in Sarah's shop, and if we have the visitor center there, and we want them to be able to do those kind of things. We went to a city or a village in Maryland, and you find a spot to park in the parallel parking or one of the designated parking spots, and you find a place that you like and look at it and just walk all around. So kind of thinking about these things, it's what we really need is some data is really what we need. So like, how much traffic do we really have right now that is going from business to business? I don't know how we measure that. How much do we have that's just stop and go? And I'm going to ask this of the Grant Society, maybe the OHC as well. And please don't kill me for this. I'm just, people ask me, why do we need a visitor center? Can we get some statistics on how many people actually visit Georgia every year, so that we can, so when someone says, why do we need a visitor center? And then we're talking among council, how do we staff this thing? If it, I think it's a great thing. We just have to, kind of wrap our minds around what it looks like for the future of Georgetown, hopefully near future. And obviously we only have till October 26th, right? But we got to start planning for the future. So I have no idea about aesthetics. I'm colorblind. I don't care what color the streets are. Any of that, everybody else can talk about. But I think we need to be forward thinking in this. So that's all I have.
my questions were asked. I do have a couple of things. I don't know if there is a plan for the for bathrooms. Yeah, in or around the visitor center where we would host events. Maybe bathrooms on the outside, perhaps, so that people can go in and out, and we don't have to, close and open it.
Yes, I mean.
Has it been spoken on?
Well, yes, I mean, to answer your question. I would say, that we are now in the beginning stages of figuring out what the visitor center is going to be. There's obviously dealing with the challenges of the site itself and getting that finished, and there's some things there, but we're working through it. When it comes to, okay, what can the visitors, just a second ago, staffing, uses of the facility, all of that kind of has to be thought through. There's a range of options of what could be done. And so I think there's more conversations to be had around that. But yes, restrooms as a part of a visitor center that would all be public facing seems to be a high priority, and your question kind of confirms that is a priority. And very interesting, and that has been replicated in some communities, and it's something we've thought of and we'll certainly incorporate into these plans now.
Councilmember Bakke?
Just a couple things. I know this is obviously in the early stage. I think my concern is something that we build that we're really proud of, making sure that we maintain it, and whether we have to spend, I don't want to say spend more than the grant, obviously, but if we need to go a little more up on the front end, 3 to 5 years from now, our maintenance costs aren't far exceeding, which I'm sure the engineering figures all that out. I'm not an engineer, but that's the concern that people have said, well, in 5 years, we're going to have to go in and redo everything. Will we have some kind of a cost benefit is when it gets closer to something that's actually nailed down, of when you're presenting those options of, what we may have, or overhead costs that we know as a council 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what we would be facing.
Yes, I mean, that is certainly something that we will provide. I would say in general, and this actually comes back to your point about roads and sidewalks, there's so many factors that determine what the useful life of infrastructure is. In general, new stuff tends to be pretty new. It's just like a car. You don't really think of the long-term maintenance until you're 4 or 5 or 6 years in. In the case of infrastructure, I think you guys just went through this with State Street and what all that's doing, useful life. It's getting close. So we're not talking about the resurfacing. Yes, having a sense of what that looks like for the village is paramount, about what those maintenance costs are. And then to your point, through the design, thinking about materials and making sure that they are easily maintainable is a critical concern. And to that end, everything you see that looks here like brick, it's actually stamped concrete. Because stamped concrete's a little bit cheaper, it's a little bit easier to maintain. Now, can there be brick elements, especially for side stuff? Yes. But in general, we're looking for ways to ensure that the product we deliver is maintainable.
Thank you. That was all I had.
Kelly, can I kind of build on what Vic said?
Do you mind to use the podium? Well, I guess it's not a podium, it's a microphone.
My knees are not.
I'm sorry.
I'm old. Skinny one. Okay, the whole idea of this was, as Bink says, make this destination. The Department of Development in the state of Ohio, they do a report I think it's every other year, about, how much money's coming in, how much is going out. A lot of people don't think that tourism is economic development, but it is. In 2021, Brown County took in $56.6 million through tourism. Now, don't ask me how they figured that, because it's some formula. In 2023, we only took in $56 million. There are only 2 counties in the state of Ohio who went down on tourism dollars, and we were one of them. So, we've got Ripley, we've got Georgetown, and, Bink said it, make it a destination. That's kind of the whole point of this. Bring in some businesses, bring in people, they spend money. But anyway, I wanted to share that. I didn't think about it until Big said that. So.
Thank you.
I could just add
Yes.
one piece to piggyback on that. Overnight visitors bring about 3 times as much money as day visitors. So this is where getting people to come and stay, when you think about what's in Brown County and Ripley and Georgetown, if you get people to stay even one night overnight, it is economic development because they bring in 3 times as much on average.
But we don't have accommodations.
Right.
Oh, I have an idea. Don't make.
I won't. Your other idea is?
Well, Airbnb. We have one facility in Georgetown that offers rooms. They have 4 rooms. I had occasion to use their services last year, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful. The people who were there are coming back to Georgetown because they had such a good time at breakfast. You tell Nancy. So, but Airbnb, now this is complicated. There are lots of people who lose people in their family, and they end up with an extra bedroom. Airbnb is a service which allows you to rent out that bedroom and to advertise it to the whole world. It will cost you some money, but it would make you some money. I went to an Airbnb a couple of years ago and paid $125 a night to use their extra bedroom. And it was lovely, and they were such nice people. And I really think that we should have some investigation of how to bring, just be quiet. Airbnb.
That's a bad idea.
It's a good idea. It's a good idea. I was looking at some pictures of towns that have tourism, and a lot of places you can see are used as an Airbnb destination, and it might only be 1 bedroom. But you get to meet all the most amazing people in the world. If you have that, Nancy, you would.
Serial killers.
Serial killers. Well, I'm not gonna name any other categories, but I haven't read about any major killings that have been done at Airbnbs lately, except by immigrants possibly. But that's another story. But anyway, I've been thinking about this for years. When I came to Georgetown 24 years ago, I wrote a paper that said I wanted to make Georgetown a destination instead of a backwater. And let's face it, we're now going to be competing with Ripley, with Higginsport, with New Richmond, which has a river, very unfair. Because they're getting money too. And it's going to be more people into this area. And we want to be able to land some of them here. And that would include having them stay overnight. Previously, when I had guests here, they had to go down all the way to Aberdeen and stayed at Jethro's, I think is what it's called. It's gone broke now. I mean, it's for sale.
Ripley has Airbnb, like the old jail is
Mm-hmm.
one, and there's some on French Street.
And some of these historic homes would be very interesting for that.
There's about
Absolutely.
6, I think, outside of Ripley and a couple around Georgetown.
Are there some in Georgetown? I've seen
They're
it
outside of Georgetown.
outside of Georgetown, yes.
Yes, there are.
So,
Thank you. Point well taken. All right. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to address the group?
I want to bring one thing up we talked about before.
Yes.
And I think you asked the question about what to do for the photographic background of the statue,
Mm-hmm.
where we have 2 missing trees,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I was gonna hug those trees so they couldn't cut them down, but I didn't get there until they were falling. There needs to be background, and I thought about that, I think it was maybe last meeting, the meeting before, and if they could come up with a tree that's narrow, that would be okay, but, I don't know, I'm not an arborist, so I don't know about that, but I was thinking maybe something like, the walls that they use for sound barriers on the freeways, that look, again, they look like stone or they look like brick, that there could just be pieces between the trees. So people have a better chance to get a photograph. And we do have numbers of who's been at the homestead. And I don't think anybody's gonna say that if you had a visitor center and it's advertised nationally, it's not gonna bring more people, okay? I've tried to think, other than the grant sites, obviously the fair is the biggest to bring people into town. But when you talk about business from visitors, how much business comes from those people who go to the fair? Because they go to the fair and yep, they're coming up and buying stuff at the hardware store, but I don't know what the restaurant numbers are during the fair. I know some of them close because everybody's eating corn dogs. It's a great thing to draw into town, but again, if you look at the economic improvement for Georgetown, I'm not sure. I know when we had the clinic in Georgetown, we basically closed because nobody was coming to the vets during the fair because we were at the fair. Those are some things to think about, but I wanted to throw that in about the statue while we're here to get that added to what they're thinking about. I don't know if that fits into this grant or not. But something like that, because you can go over there and look, and if you take pictures from the side, which is the best view of the statue, you get the broken car background, or you get the brick building background. And so, when those trees were gone, then you lost that nice green background.
Prettying up and repairing the greenery on the grant statue site is in play for this grant. Yes.
Thank you, Ned. All right. Anything else? Anyone else? Sue, hi.
Do I have to get up?
I would prefer if it's easier for those.
I only have a couple things to say. To dovetail on what some other people have said.
It's on.
Do I have to do something? Okay, well, I'm Sue Baston. I'm also a trustee with the U.S. Grand Homestead Association and pay my taxes and live in Georgetown. As far as the Airbnb idea, I think it's fair to say we're getting more and more people interest in grant, particularly since Ron Cherno's book came out about 7 or 8 years ago, which was a national bestseller. And there's been a lot more on grant and a lot more positive on grant, which he richly deserves. So when we had the bicentennial birthday year in 2022, we did something almost every month, for 9 months, and had a lot of people coming in for each of those events. And it seems like a recurring thing is, correct me if I'm not right, places to stay.
Yeah.
Because during the bicentennial, we had people come as far as Oregon, California, and it's just hard to tell them where to stay in Brown County in general. So I think the Airbnb idea is a great idea if there was some way that, and I don't know if that's something that you can address through the grant or not, but it's definitely needed, I think. Stan and Nancy do a great job with the Bailey House, but again, they only have so many rooms. And those rooms are usually taken up by General Grant and some of our other, main people who help with the program during the grant events. So that is a real concern. And I'm sure a hotel or a motel wouldn't be included in this grant. So anyway, that's something to think about. I'm sure you guys have thought about that before for other events, but it's a problem. So that, are you okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was one thing I wanted to add. And I think we've mentioned this before, with upgrading the green spaces and so on downtown. with the grant murals that are in various spots in the downtown area, we'd really like to not put trees in front of those, if that makes sense. And we talked about this at an earlier meeting. I don't think you guys were able to be here that time, but the fact that there have been issues with, can we set up certain parking spaces when things are readjusted so that people can't park in front of the murals for hours and hours and days, which has happened on end, because when people come into town, they want to take pictures of those murals. And it's hard to do with a pickup truck and a tractor trailer behind. So anyway, that's just what I want to put my 2 cents in on that, but thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. All right, looking around the room just to make sure there's no additional comments from the group.
Maybe one quick one. Going back to those bathrooms on that visitor center, maybe there could be a foyer in there with bathrooms on each side. Then there's a secondary set of doors to keep that locked. So if we have a public event going on, we could still utilize just that little foyer to go into the restrooms. And then other than that, that's all I want to say.
Thinking through the security and safety of a public-facing facility that's always available, like restrooms, is important.
Well, one of the problems with public restrooms is damage to them.
Correct.
And of course, getting dirty. We went to an event at one of the Cincinnati city parks. It was, remember? When we went to graduation.
Oh, the one down by Lumpkin.
Oh, okay.
Armley, is it Armley Park?
Armley, yeah, and we went there and, there was, it looks like 100 soccer fields around it. And they have open restrooms and went into the restroom, thinking, people tear them up, they tear the porcelain sinks off the wall, they do all that. You would have needed a 20-pound sledge to damage anything in that restroom. It was looked like it was all stainless steel. And it was on the wall and you weren't gonna move it. Now, didn't mean they're gonna, first they, we're not gonna throw paper around, they're not gonna do stuff like that. But as far as damaging, I think they had to come with the intent that I'm gonna damage that. It's not like, oh, I'm here, I'm gonna do something crazy. So I mean, that's, part of it, I think.
Yes, if we went that direction, that is a modern best practice for these kinds of facilities, including cameras, all that. So yes, I mean, that would also include any kind of, as mentioned earlier, seating, park furniture, like to the part about maintenance, like we don't want to put a bunch of nice stuff only for it to be ruined in a year. It's got to be permanent. It's got to be able to be easily maintained, which means the village can have somebody out there and hose it down when it gets, really dirty, like have it be super simple. Like that's an integral part of what we're trying to do.
All right, good feedback, guys. Great meeting tonight. I think there was a lot of valid points that were discussed and shared and documented. Where do we go from here? So this was our third meeting. Doesn't mean that we won't listen to any further commentary. If somebody has something that they want to address, certainly reach out to any one of us, any of the council members. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, feel free to reach out to the village itself. They'll get a hold of us for you. And let us know your thoughts. From this point on, we will be working with American Structure Point to kind of put some ideas in play and get some examples of what we could do. As Michael discussed, there are going to be trade-offs, if this, then this type scenarios, and we're going to be working through that as a group. We will certainly come back to the public and share feedback, and hopefully at some point share a final drawing of what this will look like. I know American Structure Point will be at the Cakes and Sips for a Cause on July 20th. They will be specifically set up to help answer questions, show ideas, listen to concepts, listen to feedback. So make sure you take advantage of that too as well. Outside of that, if there's no other further business to discuss tonight, I will certainly entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Councilmember Campbell has properly made the motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Barnhart. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you. And we're still live, guys. We're still live.
And it's important to